increasingly seeing these big companies put orders in to get people back into the workplace. For after COVID, where we got the benefits of working from home, we learnt that we could do it, we learnt it can work, but yet why is it that some of these big organisations are now saying, actually, we want you back in our offices? As a company where we all work remotely, we're completely geographically spread. I'm in the south of England, I've got somebody up in Scotland, so remote working is here to stay for us. So I'm looking at what's good, what's bad, and how you can overcome the bad. For those who haven't seen me before, I'm Jenefer, I'm the founder of Silk Helix. We are a neurodiversity specialist HR consultancy, so I'm also going to look at this from that perspective as well, and why diversity is a benefit to working from home. So I am going to dive straight in with the benefits of working from home. Number one, for me, top benefit is a diverse workforce. When you have working from home, you reduce the limits that you've got on who can work for you. Geographically spread, as I mentioned in the introduction, we as a company are geographically spread. This means that I can employ people from all across the UK, and only tax laws prevent me from employing people all across the world. But that means that there's a much bigger talent pool available to me, and it means that I can get the person that's the right fit for my business. There are also specific groups of people where working from home really does advantage them. So parents, for example, where the commute can be a real struggle because it needs to be home for children, school activities, parents' evenings, all of those things that we're required to do as parents. And of course, your neurodivergent employees, so people with ADHD, dyslexia, for example, can find that working remotely, working from home enables them to have a setup that works exactly for them, an environment that enables them to be fully productive. So it does, for me, that diverse workforce, that is the key top reason why working from home is beneficial, and why I certainly would not go back to working in an office and would always run a remote company. Now, I've mentioned parents there, which is indicative of my next benefit, which is work-life balance. Now, as a parent, I'm going to say I'm not sure how much life is in the whole school run bit, but there is a whole load of outside of that and other things that we do like to do as parents, and of course everybody else likes to do, because it's not just parents who have to do things outside of work. There are people with caring responsibilities, and of course the people that just want to do something outside of work, which we as parents probably were before we became parents. So work-life balance, it does enable people to save time. It means they're not spending time on that commute in and out of the office, which of course enables them to spend that time doing other things. It also reduces some of the small tasks and things that can fill up our evenings. So for me, putting on a laundry load, putting on a dishwasher, those are real big brain breaks for me. To do things like put on the laundry or load a dishwasher just takes me away from my work. Just a few minutes. It doesn't take a huge amount of time, but just that few minutes in my day means I get another little job moved on and done at home, which feels good because then I'm set for the next activity at home. But also in terms of my work, it just takes me away from my desk, gives me a little bit of movement, something else to focus on for a few minutes whilst I'm refreshed and back to it. So there's work benefits to that work-life balance as well, because whilst I'm having those few minutes of break, I'm then going back to being more productive because I've had those few minutes of break. So there's real benefits to this work-life balancing. And also we know that when people work from home, it's not just their life outside of work that gains from the lack of commute. Work does as well. When we're not having to rush off because we've got to meet a deadline to get out of work, plus the commute, etc., etc., we've got more flexibility to just finish this thing off before we leave our desks for the day. So work-life balance can work both ways as a benefit both to the individuals and to the company. Now this next benefit, I'm going to admit, is a bit of a privileged one. Not everybody will see this benefit from remote working, and as employers it's something we can help people with, although of course it does require the space, the real estate in our homes to be able to do that, and that's because this next benefit is a personalised workspace. So for those that are able to have a workspace that is right for being at home, and this is really important. Working from home loses a lot of its benefits when we're on the sofa with a laptop and we're not set up for it. It's not going to do our bodies any good. All of that DSE stuff we spent years on trying to make offices safe with adjustable chairs and footrests and all the things we knew about working at computers A lot of that got lost during the pandemic where people weren't properly set up from home. So that proper setup is really important. But it can also mean being able to work in different ways. So for me, being on the phone and pacing around the house whilst I'm on the phone. If you're ever on the phone to me, you may well hear in the background that's what I'm doing. I'm pacing because that's when I think best. It's how I process best. And I can do that because I'm home. I'm in an empty house. Again, the pandemic lost that because there was other people in the house. But I'm at home, I'm in an empty house, the children are off to school, and I can pace and use the environment. I can also move away from my desk if I want some fresh ideas. I just want to sit somewhere else and have a think about how I do things. So I can have that space that works exactly how I want it. I can have the temperature as I want it. We can have the music as I want it. That makes a huge difference, being able to have our environment exactly as we want and need it. And we know in the office there's arguments over the temperature, the air conditioning, the heating, because we can never please everybody. And particularly for those who are neurodivergent, which generally need some supports around them. And that could be things like headphones, quiet, noise, light, dark. There's a whole range of different sort of sensory inputs that can impact somebody's productivity. And when we're at home, we can really make that our own. And mentioning productivity there, that brings me on to the final benefit, which is increased productivity and decreased absence. Studies have consistently shown that when people remote work, their productivity is increased and absence levels are decreased. How sick is too sick becomes a higher bar when we work from home, when there are the options to say, do you know what, today I'll just get these few emails done. I might be working from the sofa. When I was pregnant, I had morning sickness. Being able to adjust my work around that because I worked from home to manage that morning sickness and then go into working when I was productive without having like an hour's commute in between made a huge difference to me. So that productivity increased. Those are days I would have been calling in sick, so the absence levels was decreased. And studies have consistently shown that this is the case across the board. So it's not really clear why companies are so adamant to bring people back into the work environment, other than things like obviously paying rents on buildings, and there's a few other things like that could be coming into the mix. I'm going to move on to the bads now and some of the struggles with management. And there could be some question marks for some people over these productivity and absence issues, which actually could come from not structuring your sort of management and how you structure work properly, as opposed to it actually being a working from home issue. So moving on then to the negatives of working from home. What's the bad? What goes wrong? Why might these companies be pulling people back into the office? The top one is isolation. So for some people, being at home can be quite isolating. They thrive off the office environment, being around people, being able to have those conversations. For other people, they don't. So it's a personal preference. I prefer personally not to be in an office and to be able to focus and be on my own. I do like talking to other people as well. It's not that I want to be on my own all the time, but most of the time when I'm focused trying to work, for me, being on my own really helps. Now, I know for others, things like body doubling, so with ADHD, for example, body doubling can be beneficial. It can help people to get tasks done. And actually, sometimes I need that and I use video calls for it. So it can be overcome in different ways, but the work environment can be beneficial for people where isolation is an issue. This can also be a challenge if we're looking at, say, domestic abuse and increased instances of domestic abuse, or the ability of abusers to isolate people further. And if you're forced to work from home, there can be challenges around that, where actually it would be safer or better for you to be able to leave the home and get into a work environment. So do accept that isolation could be a challenge, and is something as employers we need to be thinking about and looking at how do we overcome this challenge and how do we make sure that there are those social connections with our teams in a work environment. Now, I put work-life balance in there as a positive. I'm actually going to mention it as a negative as well, because I mentioned the ability to stay working. So when you're not being sort of pulled out because you've got to do the commute, or when my children were younger, I might stop work, spend some time with them in the evening, and then go back to work once they'd gone to bed, which is something that commuting wouldn't have allowed me to do. Challenge to that, of course, is that it can create blurred boundaries. It can make it hard for people to manage, where do I stop work and when am I at home? When can I be just away from my desk? So if you can always see your desk, see your desktop, your work screen, when you're trying to manage home things, that can stop you being able to sort of shut down mentally to that and just be present at home and in your home environment. So there are some challenges there. And again, for those who are able to have a separate room where they can work, they can shut the door on that, that's going to be really beneficial and help to unblur those lines and make sure that we've got a situation where we can really sort of put some boundaries around. And employers should do that. They should encourage individuals to be putting boundaries around what is work and what is home. And then my final challenge to working from home, which is often brought up by these companies that are bringing people back into the office, is things like lack of teamwork, lack of collaboration, lack of communication, people not feeling supported by their managers, these sorts of things. Now, this is because when we're working from home, these things don't happen by accident. Now, I would question whether they happen by accident in the office, but they're more likely to. And I guess it's not, would I question that, well, they happen by accident in the office, but more, do they happen in an effective way in the office? Because I think we need to be planning our management structures, our work structures, how we structure work, how we structure teamwork, what teamwork really means, what's individual responsibility. I think, and I advocate when I'm doing sort of management training, that these things are all really structured, whether we're in the office or working from home. But when we're working from home, there's a lot more proactive thought that needs to go into these things. It's a lot harder to lean across the desk and ask a question. That said, use of things like team chats means that we can often do that with minimal interruption because somebody else can answer as and when they're able to, when their mind's free and they can do that. But then that also brings in the need for trust and trusting that if somebody's not responding, there's a valid reason for that and they're just busy in that moment as opposed to, I know, somewhere off kind of gallivanting, not working. And I think that's what the thought often comes to. We do need to make sure that as managers we're having structured kind of regular check-ins, one-to-ones, to make sure that people have got the ability to talk to us, to say, actually, I'm struggling with this, or I've got this challenge going on. Making sure that people know they've got our time and attention, because it's really easy when you remote work to be solely focused on what you do and have your kind of closed mind. The team are over there, they're doing their thing without really thinking as a manager, oh, do I need to be checking in on that person or that person? And when we can see people, those sorts of things do tend to happen more by accident. So that sort of practice of getting into that and that routine, that structure is really important. But equally, that structure, that routine can be beneficial for some neurodivergent employees who need that to kind of work within. Others don't. Others benefit more from being able to kind of listen to their bodies, work with their own rhythms, their own flows, kind of like, oh, I know that I do this best in the morning, let me focus on this bit in the morning. Others need a bit more structure around it, and that's where we need to adapt our management styles to individuals within the teams. And again, whether we're working from home or in the office, I would advocate that that's crucial, that we are considering our management styles and our expectations of individuals takes into account how individuals work best so that we can get the best out of them. And then just like being in the office, we need to make sure that we've got kind of mental health support, well-being check-ins, that people know how and when they can get support, and that we recognise that there can be challenges for people. And that managers are trained. This is always an area that ends up lacking, is managers that are not given the training. And I think especially when people work from home and we've got to be more proactive, more structured about this, it's even more important that managers have training and that training factors in that people are working from home and that we need to be more proactive about communication and management styles. I think that training should also always factor in neurodiversity. We know that 20% of our workforce, or 20% of people, and therefore most likely our workforce, are neurodivergent. So it's highly likely that managers are going to be managing somebody who is neurodivergent. So having management training that factors that in, and indeed factors in employment law as well, so that it's all compliant and we're considering all of these different issues in amongst the kind of best practice and how we lead, how we be good, empathetic leaders. All of that has to factor together, and it's really important that managers have the skills to be able to lead in that environment in order to get all the benefits that I mentioned of working from home. And I think it's where these things are falling down. that often lead to companies just going, okay, fine, we'll all come back to the office. Now, actually, I think we're going to have similar problems in the office. I think they're just a lot more hidden because we can see people, so we assume they're working. And it's actually easier to hide that low productivity, I think, in the office because our mindset is just, oh, well, people are here, so they must be being productive. Whereas our mindset at home is, oh, they're not here, so they must be not be being productive. Whereas actually we need to be looking at what is it that people are actually achieving? Are they achieving what we expect them to be achieving? What does good look like? What do we expect of people, and are they actually achieving that? Like with everything else, there isn't a one size fits all. And of course, for some organisations, working from home is going to be so much easier than others. In some, that hybrid needs to be in the office for these things and at home for those things. It's going to work much better. And of course, there are some jobs where you just got to be there. You've got to be present. The waiting staff in a restaurant, they can't be working from home. And I get that. And I get that working from home is not for every role. So it's not a one size fits all. But if you are in a position where working from home could be considered, I think there are benefits to it. And I think training managers to handle it well and to lead in that environment will overcome the challenges and will mean that you can get the benefits of working from home. Stay tuned for more videos. I release a new video every Tuesday. In the meantime, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss a single one. And I look forward to seeing you next week.